Everton deducted 10 points with immediate effect. Now, that has kicked in, and I think Evertonians, by and large, are getting used to the idea that life goes on and they have 10 points fewer than they had. But Simon, you're going to hear a recorded chat I did earlier on. Then off the back of it, I want to put various points to you. Various politicians they are seemingly jumping on the Everton bandwagon. For example, Ian Byrne, the MP for Liverpool West Derby, has tabled an early day motion in Parliament today, calling the 10-point deduction for Everton as grossly unjust. Elsewhere, the Mayor of Liverpool, who's not here, he's abroad at the moment, Steve Rotherham, has written to Richard Masters of the Premier League describing Everton's 10-point deduction as ludicrous and claiming that the punishment quite simply does not fit the crime. This man is well known in Liverpool, was particularly well known on Merseyside because of his political activities many years ago. He's a season ticket holder at Goodison and has been for many years. He's a former council leader, and he is Derek Hatton. And I put it to Derek earlier on that what was his stance as others are now commenting? That the punishment, 10 points deduction, quite simply, is a punishment that doesn't fit the crime.
I mean, the whole thing, it stinks, Jim, and I don't know why it stinks and I don't know where it comes from. I'm not privy to those discussions. I mean, you can say, OK, West Ham's former finance director, that was one of the three-man independent panel that decided on Everton's 10-point deduction. There, you've got to question that. Far be it from me to accuse barristers of acting improperly, but it's how it's seen, it's the perception. And then you get a position where, after all that, for 20 million overspend, which in real terms is pennies, you're talking about a 10-point reduction. Now, some questions have got to be asked why that is happening. I don't know the way it's happening, but there's certainly something very, very wrong in it. Now, as a result of that, you're going to see a mass reaction, certainly from the supporters at Everton. I mean, Sunday against United is going to be like a bear pit, without question. I mean, you've seen, from the days when we beat Bayern Munich in the semi-final of the European Cup Winners' Cup through to Crystal Palace when we stayed up, and all sorts of moods around. There will be nothing like you'll see on Sunday. I mean, everyone's saying that you've picked on the wrong team. Well, you've certainly picked on the wrong group of supporters.
Probably you'd echo what the Mayor Steve Rotherham is saying, that Everton deserve to be treated justly and with respect. But what would you say to those, Derek, who would rightly say, well, hang on, you broke the rules. There have to be consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I think the likes of Steve Rotherham, who's the regional mayor, who's a bitter red. Ian Byrne, who's putting a motion to Parliament today, who again was part of Spirit of Shankly, a bitter red. Both great fellas, both good football supporters, both see there's something very wrong and are both coming out loud and clear saying there's something wrong. You wouldn't get them as red saying this and in their position if they didn't think that something was wrong. Of course there's a punishment if any of you've done anything wrong. And yeah, if we've done something wrong, you deserve a punishment. But for the sake of a £20 million overspend, which, by the way, these rules were brought in after the offence, not before the offence, which again begs a question. So, yeah, of course, if the rule's been broken, then something's got to be done about it. But 10 points for the sake of 20 million, something very wrong there, Jim.
Derek, as you say, this issue is set to be discussed in Parliament this morning. But do you think truly this is an area that the government, that Parliament should be involved in?
Yeah, because football is part of the lifeblood of this city and this country. You can't just say, oh, well, football's there, let them look after themselves when something is very, very wrong. And if you feel something's very, very wrong, then, yeah, the government have got to get involved. And I would always argue that, because at the end of the day, you're talking about a democratically elected government, not one I may like. That's not the point. You're still talking about a good democratically elected government, and they must be able to have a look at things that are going wrong in whatever and make a comment on it.
You say without a shadow of a doubt, this will galvanise the Everton support ahead of this match against Manchester United?
I think on Sunday, as I say, I think you'll see the sort of bear pit that you've never seen before in Goodison. You've seen some amazing scenes, as I said, Bayern Munich, you saw Crystal Palace, you saw Bournemouth. You've seen loads of it, but nothing will compare to what you see Sunday. Because fans live for their football clubs, and certainly Evertonians live for Everton. And they are absolutely steaming. They're furious. They're furious with a lot of people. But the reality is they've got to concentrate on the Premier League. That's who they're angry with on Sunday.
That was Derek Hatton, who says Goodison on Sunday for the visit to Manchester United is going to be like a bear pit like you've never seen before, as the fans set to galvanise the club as much as they can. Simon, there have been suggestions, and Derek was amongst those who are suggesting that one member of the panel who arrived at the 10-point deduction was the former West Ham finance director who was in situ during the Tevez Mascherano fiasco. I mean, when you hear stuff like that, is it no wonder that Evertonians like Derek are sceptical?
I mean, listen, you know my view. I think that the punishment was harsh, and it certainly gives you an opportunity to pull at a ball of wool. If indeed that was the case, if indeed that was the case, that somebody was the finance director of another Premier League football club, whilst it gives you expertise, I would find that perplexing that would be the case. And I'd be clear. I'd like to know if that were the case before I make an observation on it. I don't want politicians anywhere near football, anywhere near it, with all due respect to them.
Why?
Because I don't think they have a fundamental understanding of what goes into actually running the game, and they're motivated by a very different agenda than the well-being of the game. They're motivated by the ability to be able to get themselves into the headlines and parachute into something without understanding the length and breadth of it.
But they're there to serve the constituents
and that's
who
the point.
live in communities
and that is the point.
Evertonians live in a certain communities.
And that is the reasons why they're writing to the government, or writing to whoever they may think to the Premier League, to suggest that there needs to be intervention from the government. It's got nothing to do with the government. Precisely nothing to do with the government. They can represent their constituents, and if their constituents are banging down their door, like that busy sod that decided to write a letter to me because he didn't like a terminology I used on the show. So if that's what they feel they need to do with their time... No, not at all. They've got nothing to do. I mean, you saw me debate with people like Julian Knight on here from the DCMS when they were going off on their ridiculous flights of fancy and finding out that actually what they actually alluded to wasn't actually correct.
So why are they involved? Is it political point scoring?
Well, of course it is. Why do you think the Labour Party introduced in their manifesto 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago that every single football club that gets sold, 10% of the shares should be sold to the fans? Yeah. Because it's a populist way of communicating with a electorate.
They've always done it, though, haven't they?
But
this isn't anything new.
But it doesn't mean it should be encouraged.
Even high profile. I asked Margaret Thatcher, no less, why are you involved in the draw for the Scottish Cup in the late 80s? Is it a way of you achieving cheap political gain? She didn't like the question. The same applies here. And you're saying, this is what they are doing.
Of course there is. Of course Thatcher did it. They're always involved. We've gone back to the task force, the task force of football that David Mellor was involved in, and the Minister for Sport, Tony Banks, wasn't it, I think at the time, that were involved in doing things with sport. Yeah. But what we're talking about now is, of course, when you hear certain voices, certain socialist voices like Derek Hatton that have a certain view of the way the world should be, of course you're going to make a campaign for independent regulation. Of course, underpinning this will be the next trotted out load of observations, particularly from a certain political persuasion, normally the left, that there's a necessity to do things in a certain way. And yes, I think there should be better governance. Yes, I do think there should be a little bit of transparency.
I mean, the Mayor of Liverpool's due a response from Richard Masters of the Premier League, is he not?
Well, I don't think Richard Masters works for the Mayor of Liverpool. I don't think Richard Masters needs to do anything. Richard Masters set up an independent commission, and the independent commission has adjudicated. The Premier League put forward their case, and in fact Richard Masters' position would be, actually, we wanted worse for Everton, so buzz off. We wanted 12 points. If Richard Masters had anything about him, he'll probably politic his way through it a little bit. But the idea that somehow there's any relevance in what these politicians are actually saying, I understand they're representing their community and their constituents. But as far as them having any investment and involvement in the understanding of the reasons why football operates the way that it does, if we want to get these politicians involved, just watch the landscape of what they've done to the country. Watch the way that we've lived for the last 3 or 4 years. Watch the methods that we've had deployed over us as a society by these imbeciles, and suggest they should be anywhere near our national sport. That does not mean that I think our national sport is run as well as it could be. Of course it could be run better. You know that I think that the de facto regulator in the game is the FA, and they've abdicated all responsibility.
Are you talking about what's coming out of the COVID hearing in Boris?
I'm talking about a whole raft of things. I'm talking about the idea that an independent regulator that's going to be populated by the same people that populate all the regulators in this country, like Ofgem, Ofcom, Ofwat, all of these imbeciles that have made our lives a misery. We're now advocating for them to effectively run football.
Yeah,
and of course the politicians will want it.
There's Baz, who's a big Evertonian. I love Simon. What's his take on it regards to takeover? Any effect whatsoever on the takeover?
No, only the effect it'll be is in Mashiri's pocket in terms of the price that people are going to pay. And I don't think Everton are in jeopardy of getting relegated. I'm in the camp of supporting Everton. I'm not arguing against Derek Hatton's principle that ultimately the sanction is harsh. And I've already made the case that when a club goes into administration, which is a far worse financial situation in terms of breaches of all its obligations, it gets 9 points. But when Derek sits there espousing the world, it's only 20 million quid. It wasn't 20 million quid. Their losses were 350 million. They were allowed adjustments, right, that brought them down to be able to lose 105 million, and they couldn't even manage it that way. So they end up losing 125. They shouldn't be praised. They shouldn't be rewarded. They should be consequenced. And then we'll have an argument. If it was 6 points, the same voices would be coming out and saying it should be 3. Yeah. If it were 3 points, the same voices would be coming up and saying it should be 2. I do think it's harsh. I do think, because I've made the argument, I made it before anyone else made it.
I said it on Friday.
There's an element of the climate. Everton could be a victim of their times. Yeah. But Everton put themselves in this situation, and they put themselves as a hostage to fortune. And I'm really not interested, with all due respect, to a bunch of rather verbose politicians trying to get themselves in the front of headlines.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the TalkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. TalkSPORT.